The story begins with the Sword Sect, for the 5 beautiful girls are quite happy, remarking that it is the 5th elder, Subei. They note that among the 9 elders of the Sword Sect, only the 5th elder is this young. The girls describe him as an elegant and smart young man, confident and charming, with a unique manner. He has unparalleled looks, a striking appearance, dignified features, and a graceful bearing. When Elder Subei mentions that he is going to find disciples, the girls become even more excited. They speculate that he is going to take in disciples again and express their desire to be his disciple. Subei, however, thinks to himself that people only see him for his looks, but his strength is also superb. The system informs him that a new disciple with a revolutionary fate has been discovered and requests him to find the disciple as soon as possible. Subei realizes that this is the first time the system has recommended such an amazing person and feels that it was worthwhile to wait for this moment, anticipating a significant and rewarding discovery. The system announces that a new disciple with a revolutionary fate has been discovered and requests the host to find the disciple as soon as possible. A girl's profile is displayed, revealing her as SSR named Zyad Ruaching, with a height of 168 centimeters and weight of 47 kilograms. Her measurements are listed as 93-58-88, and her characteristics include being an orphan with a deep desire for revenge, having an innate powerful physique, excellent skeletal structure, and exceptional refinement. Subei expresses his excitement, exclaiming his intention of finding pure and flawless men and women for a master-disciple relationship, and notes that the system has misunderstood him. He thinks to himself that with the numerous advantages this girl has, it seems as though the heavens have marked her with a conceited expression. Subei also considers that the system allows him to take only 2 disciples, and if he can take her in, he will be able to rest comfortably. Meanwhile, on the other side, a burly man is forcibly engaging with Zyad Ruaching, taunting her about their supposed wedding. In her attempt to save herself, Zyad Ruaching calls out for her father and mother. However, the man, while tearing her clothes, declares that he can no longer hold back, and drooling, he comments on her weakness. At that moment, a voice is heard from behind, remarking on the man's impatience. The burly man, surprised, asks who it is and turns around to see a fierce young man. He comments that he understands the young man's parents have already passed away and his home was destroyed. Subei then introduces himself as the 5th elder of the Sword Sect, Subei, and asks if the young man is willing to join the Immortals. Zyad Ruaching, recognizing Subei, thinks about the Sword Sect and the Immortals. Subei, noticing her hesitation, states that if she is not interested, their predestined fate ends here. Zyad Ruaching, still contemplating, realizes it is him. Subei, determined not to let her go, decides to try a more aggressive approach. Observing Zyad Ruaching, he notes her extraordinary talent and unparalleled natural gifts. He thinks to himself that with such a first-rate disciple appearing, he was initially worried the system wouldn't provide a good reward. Finally, Zyad Ruaching declares her willingness to join. Subei, noting her expression isn't quite what he expected, hears her address him as master and pays her respects. Subei responds likewise, thinking that while she is a bit reserved, she is also respectful to her master. Meanwhile, the system announces feedback, stating that with a higher apprenticeship rate of 10,000, it congratulates the host for taking in a disciple and rewards him with 10 consecutive draws. Subei, thinking that this is the configuration a protagonist should have, initiates the draw. The system congratulates the host for obtaining a foundation building pill, a common cultivating pill, common stanch blood powder, and a basic poison that will kill after consumption. Subei, disappointed, wonders if the way he draws cards is wrong, given these rewards. However, the system then congratulates the host for obtaining the legendary reward, the rank title of Son of Destiny, and informs him that his luck value has reached its upper limits. Subei, now satisfied, thinks that this is what he was hoping for. Turning to Zyad Ruaching, he tells her that they will return to the sect and after finishing her training, he will personally accompany her as a teacher to fulfill today's revenge. Zyad Ruaching expresses her gratitude, and the two stand on a flying sword, departing from the scene. Subei explains to his disciple that since she has entered the realm of immortals, there are a few things she needs to know. He emphasizes that the immortal path is boundless and requires a steady and serious personality, cautioning against expecting everything to be served on a silver platter. He warns that opportunities to encounter a hero are rare. Meanwhile, a man standing below warns that if anyone bothers the lady again, he will behead them. The lady thanks her hero, while Zayed, watching, looking down, questions her master. Sube continues, stating that even if she is very talented, there aren't many peerless skills one can easily find in this world. A person named Huhan-san joyfully declares that he has finally obtained the 18,000 compositions of Shanglong. Zayed watching calls out to her master again, but Sube silences her, stating that immortal cultivation is a dull and uninteresting subject, regardless of strength or luck. He stresses that the most important thing is to give feedback to the master to survive. Zayed watching expresses her understanding and gratitude to her master for his merciful kindness, promising to work hard on her cultivation. Sube responds approvingly, informing her that they have arrived at the Sword Sect and from now on, she will be his personal disciple, not just a disciple of the Sword Sect. Zayed watching, while thinking about the Sword Sect and her return, resolves internally that she will definitely kill Sube in this life. A disciple girl informs Sube that the Grand Elder has summoned him for a meeting. Sube acknowledges, saying he is on the way. Meanwhile, Zayed watching loses her balance on the sword and falls on her large chest. Sube instructs her to follow his orders and return to Bujian Peak, promising to come back after the meeting ends. Zayed watching asks her master to return early and wonders why he seems different from the shady and bold tyrant of her previous life. Before leaving, Sube reminds her to find the breathing exercises pad on the corner of his desk and to look at it first, but warns her not to touch the bottle on his desk for any reason. Zayed watching agrees, though inwardly defiant. Sube thinks to himself that he never expected the first disciple the system let him accept to be so well behaved. He plans to examine if there are any changes in the system properties. The system lists the host's physical attributes: strength, defense, speed, attack, and health. Sube, frustrated, questions if the system is joking, pointing out that they had an agreement for apprenticeship up to 10,000 times feedback, yet no change has occurred. The system responds, stating that the host also needs to work hard to improve the disciple's cultivation before being eligible to draw a reward, urging him to give it his all. Sube reflects that he initially thought the system was RPG-like, not expecting it to be a cultivation one. He recalls feeling the system was unreliable from the beginning, thinking back to a month ago. At that time, the system congratulated him on obtaining the apprenticeship up to 10,000 times feedback system. Sube, once a regular person, remembers how he was reading a novel under the covers and holding back the urge to pee, deciding to finish the last 30 chapters before going to the bathroom. He realizes that his transmigration happened because his bladder swelled excessively, leading to a dysfunctional regulation, as explained by the system. At present, Sube accuses the system of being a scammer. The Grand Elder, Ping Xian, welcomes him back warmly, expressing how much she missed him and showing affection. Sube, feeling overwhelmed, tries to address her behavior by suggesting they get down to business since he has other matters to attend to. The second elder, Shichingi, coughs and remarks that the Grand Elder should be mindful of the impression she gives to others. Ping Xian responds dismissively, mentioning that she has known Sube since he was young and has taken care of him, implying their close relationship. Shichingi then points out the absurdity of the situation. The Grand Elder, known for her dignity, is holding and rubbing the Fifth Elder against her chest, and the Fifth Elder, who is bewitched by his female disciples, is still at the middle stage of deity transformation. She also criticizes the Sixth Elder for acting more like a drunkard, noting that none of them seem to understand proper behavior. The Sixth Elder, Jun Wuxia, expresses surprise upon seeing the fifth junior brother, acknowledging his hard work and noting that he is already in the return to the void stage. Shi Qingyi, frustrated, slams Jun Wuxia's head onto the floor and admonishes him for being proud of reaching the void stage, pointing out that their sect is ranked 985th, and in those 985, no sect has elders with cultivation levels below the middle stage of return to the void. Jun Wuxia calls out to the second senior sister, while Ping Xian laughs and contrasts their sword sect with other sects, stating that their elders are friendly and do not engage in power struggles and scheming like those in other sections. Su Bei reflects on Ping Xian's intervention, acknowledging her help. Ping Xian then shifts the focus to the main subject, this year's recruitment conference. Su Bei thinks about the conference, which occurs once every 50 years, and wonders if the system has the power of foreknowledge. The system responds, clarifying that it does not possess such a skill. Ping Xian states that the person in charge of the recruitment conference must be someone really powerful, with plenty of free time and strong eloquence. Without these qualities, good seedlings might be snatched up by people from other sections. Shi Qingyi responds that she will not delegate that responsibility to others, as she is likely the only one with the power to handle their sword sect's recruitment conference. She thinks of using the opportunity to expand the strength of her highest sword peak, considering that it might lead to her being the only candidate for the next Grand Elder's position. Ping Xian then remarks that she believes little Bebe fulfills all the necessary requirements for the role. On the other side, Xiad Ruoqing questions why she is not allowed to touch the small bottle, deciding to defy the restriction and do it anyway. As door opens, she sees someone and asks who they are and what they are doing. Xiad Ruoqing warns that she will scream if they come any closer. The chicken beast responds with clucking sounds, indicating that no one will pay attention even if she screams at the top of her lungs. At this moment, Su Bei enters, observing that they seem to be getting along well, and questions what the chicken beast is doing to his disciple. The chicken beast hesitates and clucks, explaining that it was only helping by taking care of her and had no other reason. Su Bei then realizes that the chicken beast let Xiad Ruoqing drink the whole bottle of whiskey he had brewed for his sixth brother. The chicken beast clucks again, admitting it happened in a moment of inattentiveness, and announces it is going to cook. Su Bei thinks to himself about how the chicken beast has been nagging all day since it grew up, and if it weren't for its ability to do housework, he would have turned it into chicken stew long ago. He reflects on Xiad Ruoqing's unfortunate past, with her parents killed and her own life almost ruined, but he also considers her lucky to have such an elegant and confident master with a high level of cultivation and outstanding positive energy. This, he thinks, demonstrates that there's a will of the heavens even in darkness. Xiad Ruoqing questions why Su Bei is still alive, and Jun Wuxia enters, asking why the room smells so much like wine and if it is because of the whiskey Su Bei had promised to brew for him. Xiad Ruoqing, feeling uneasy, tells her master not to touch her. Hearing this, Jun Wuxia decides to come back in 1 minute, thinking Su Bei is busy. Su Bei quickly tries to correct the misunderstanding, telling his junior brother not to get it wrong. Jun Wuxia angrily questions if Su Bei said 1 minute and accuses him of deception, demanding to know if the whiskey promised to him has been consumed. Su Bei thinks the main issue is that he did not do anything to his own disciple. Xiad Ruoqing, finding the noise annoying, looks at her hands and wonders if the pants and socks she is wearing, which feel quite special, were put on her by Su Bei. She considers that they might be the new disciples' attire of the sword sect, noting that they fit well and are pleasantly cool. Realizing that Su Bei will be angry when he discovers she stole and drank his bottle of whiskey, Xiad Ruoqing resolves to think of a method to deal with it. She then comes out and greets Su Bei, mentioning that she has made soup and inviting him to taste it. Su Bei imagines that his apprentice is really good, but also suspects he has been fooled by seductive skills and believes there is something special waiting for him in the soup. Xiad Ruoqing offers to serve Su Bei a bowl of soup first. Su Bei, noticing her long, silky legs, is captivated. When she questions what he is looking at, he shifts his thoughts to the high, massive mountain and realizes that she might have used the crude salt meant for treating constipation in pigs as seasoning. Jun Wuxia protests, insisting that since his whiskey was consumed by both Su Bei and Xiad Ruoqing, the chicken soup should serve as compensation. Xiad Ruoqing tries to stop Jun Wuxia, but he drinks the soup, wondering where the chicken came from. After tasting it, he exclaims that the chicken must be a phoenix-feathered chicken, cultivated to a fine level, and praises Su Bei for making soup with such a divine delicacy. Su Bei is shocked to hear about the phoenix-feathered chicken. Jun Wuxia then declares he will not be polite and suggests that Su Bei just provide another bottle of whiskey to settle the issue. Su Bei urgently tells Jun Wuxia to stop drinking, while Jun Wuxia dismisses the concern, betting that it was nothing more than a fart. August 4th, 4:23 p.m., Kunal Jadov. At Bujian Peak, a man notices a strange smell and comments on how it feels familiar. Another man recalls that the fifth elder once studied something called methane, which seems to be the source of the smell. A third man mentions that the Grand Elder had halted the fifth elder's research. Meanwhile, Xiad Ruoqing reflects on how the devil, Su Bei, is skilled at making things, and finds the air freshener to be a convenient tool, especially given how dirty the sixth elder is. She sighs and thinks that a book, stained by the sixth elder, needs to be replaced to hold the feet of the bed. Discovering that the book is the sword sect's untold secrets, the sword code, She realizes that it must have been hidden there to prevent her from finding such a valuable book. Determined, she declares that with rigorous training, she will surpass Su Bei in no time. Su Bei, holding the book, remarks on how the toilet paper he had used to pad the foot of the bed should be put back quickly to prevent the bed from shaking when it's time to sleep. He expresses that while Zayed Ruoqing's desire for revenge is noted, her technique seems average. Zayed Ruoqing argues that the book is the secret method of the sword sect and cannot be average. She is relieved that Su Bei did not discover her calling him a devil. Su Bei responds that the hidden sword pavilion contains better techniques than the sword code. Zayed Ruoqing, impressed, suggests that these must be techniques exclusive to elders and then asks Su Bei to help her access the hidden sword pavilion. Su Bei, while acknowledging the request, offers to transmit a training method as her master, asserting that it should be the best. Zayed Ruoqing praises Su Bei as the best master in the world. Su Bei, standing on top of his sword, was approached by onlookers who wondered why the fifth elder had come to the hidden sword pavilion. They speculated that his prolonged stagnation at the deity transformation realm must have been a source of shame for him. Shi Qingyi asked Su Bei what he needed from the pavilion. Su Bei responded that he had come to retrieve a valuable book. Shi Qingyi then suggested that Su Bei should leave and never return. Su Bei agreed, stating he would never come back. Shi Qingyi expressed her struggle to understand the cutting thousands of constellations with a blade of grass realm, which Su Bei had mentioned 2 years ago. She requested his guidance. Now that they had met, Su Bei thought to himself that he did not mind Shi Qingyi's nonsensical talk. The bald man remarked that the fifth elder had completely lost his mind with his talk of cutting stars with a blade of grass. One of his companions pointed out that the fifth elder had been stuck at the deity transformation realm for a long time. Su Bei asked Shi Qingyi if she really did not understand and expressed a wish that he could deceive others like the senior sister used to with her couplets. Shi Qingyi apologized, admitting that she was indeed confused and did not understand. Su Bei expressed his disappointment and asked Shi Qingyi if, as a sword practitioner, she knew what the way of the sword was. Shi Qingyi responded by saying that she believed the sword path was limitless, with a boundless sword capable of breaking all laws. She explained that when a person and the sword become one, no one can stand in their way. Su Bei dismissed this, suggesting that it was not necessary. The bald man questioned whether there could be a more powerful technique than turning into a sword. His companions expressed curiosity about what the fifth elder would explain next and noted that it was worthy of the absolute swordsman who could obliterate constellations. Su Bei reflected on his own significance, believing that with 3 million swordsmen born, one should bow in his presence. He considered that without him, the immortal Su Bei, the way of the sword would never have developed. He imagined a sword that could divide the sea of clouds and break mountains and rivers. He described a sword capable of cutting flesh and the heart's soul, patrolling the skies with dedication, and crossing rivers without retreat under the heavens. Su Bei thought that there was no turning back from the lies that had been told. He addressed Shi Qingyi, explaining that life is brief and everything in the world is a matter of one sword. With a sword, one could heal the world of injustice and achieve a clear conscience, which is precisely the way of the sword. Shi Qingyi asked if this was the path Su Bei had comprehended. Su Bei responded that he wished for a world filled with sincere swordsmen, where everyone could wield a sword capable of cutting through the sky. He envisioned a sword answering his call and falling from the heavens. Shi Qingyi was surprised by Su Bei's high realm of understanding and admitted to being impulsive. Su Bei encouraged her not to feel embarrassed and affirmed that he wanted her to be like him as well. Shi Qingyi agreed and called for the sword. The bald man remarked that the eighth elder had directly advanced to the middle stage of void refinement, which made her so formidable. His companion noted that the fifth elder, at the very least, was already at the peak of cultivation. Another companion added that the fifth elder's words had enlightened her, questioning how such a method could originate from someone at the deity transformation stage. Su Bei thought about pretending to leave, feeling excited. He wondered which technique would be suitable for his disciple and was intrigued by a technique with a name implying it was essential for protagonists. He decided it was the right choice, especially since it was extraordinary enough to enter the hidden sword pavilion. He then sensed someone watching him, though there was only the pavilion's guard, the ninth elder, the flower of the mountain, present. When the ninth elder, Shan Wulan, inquired about his intentions, Su Bei dismissed her reserved demeanor and decided to leave with the rare book he had obtained. Zayed watching, reflecting on her past life, realized she used unimportant books to pass the time but now felt the need to directly practice the sword code and eliminate Subei. She found the sword sect's secret art to be profoundly knowledgeable. Subei suddenly appeared behind her, excitedly showing a book he had obtained as a great treasure for her. Zayed watching, though initially skeptical, questioned the book's warning that inadequate luck and cultivation could lead to death. Subei reassured her, asking if she still couldn't trust him and pointing out there was no benefit in harming her. He reminded her that if he hadn't saved her, she would already be dead, suggesting she should be thankful for being a stepping stone in his career. Subei then remarked on her breakthrough, praising her as a peerless furnace and implying she was superior even to another, Lear. He callously accepted her Dao bones as her master, advising her not to be so pure in her next life. Zayed watching reflected on how Subei had used her as a furnace and dug up her Dao bones. Subei asked if she had put the sword code at the foot of the bed, noting that the bed would be very shaky if she took it away, even if she was excited about the new rare book. He wondered why she had a murderous look, assuming she wanted him to teach her the book to avenge her family's death. Placing his hand on her, he asked if she missed her home and told her to practice well, as Bujian Peak would be her home from now on. Zayed watching promised to train to the utmost of her ability, thinking to herself that she would eventually bash him to death. Subei explained he had thoroughly read all the books in the Hidden Sword Pavilion before finding this wonderful treasure and told her to cherish it. When Zayed watching questioned if it was possible to read all the countless books in the pavilion in just 1 hour, Subei dismissed the concern, telling her not to pay attention to minor details. As Zayed watching read the book, she came across a warning about needing the confidence of being a child of revolutionary fate, prompting her to ponder the meaning of being a protagonist and a child of revolutionary fate. Zayed watching wondered if Subei had discovered her rebirth and resolved to follow his words to avoid suspicion. She expressed her confusion about the strange book, asking if he thought she was the protagonist and if it was related to a child of revolutionary fate. Subei responded that everyone is the protagonist of their own life. Zayed watching thought to herself that Subei's amazing destiny was essentially set in stone and questioned who would be qualified as a child of revolutionary fate if not him. Subei, placing his hand on her head, encouraged her to be confident and to pay close attention to the airflow as he enlightened her. Zayed watching found the process difficult, expressing her struggle. At that moment, Shi Qingyi arrived, seeking advice from Subei on a few things she still failed to understand. Subei reassured Zayed watching to bear with it, acknowledging that it would be difficult at first but would eventually become comfortable. Zayed watching remarked on how domineering her master was. Shi Qingyi asked what Subei and Zayed watching were doing. Subei explained that he was helping his disciple by opening up a blockaded area of her knowledge. Shi Qingyi pointed out that it was broad daylight and questioned the appropriateness of their actions. Subei retorted that a deity touching the head and tying the hair as a sign of long life was a form of enlightenment he was giving his apprentice. Shi Qingyi commented that something seemed wrong with Zayed watching's expression but then shifted to thank Subei, acknowledging that his few sentences had been instrumental in her progress to the void refining stage. In her thoughts, Shi Qingyi considered Subei a model for her generation, having illuminated her obscure path. Subei pondered if geniuses could really learn something with just a few words. Zayed watching was astonished, thinking that to instruct a void refinement cultivator, the instructor must be at the peak of cultivation, and wondered if Subei was actually beyond the deity transformation stage. Shi Qingyi mentioned that Big Sister had asked her to give something to Subei but was distracted by the strange appearance of the pants. Subei explained that he found skirts inconvenient for daily practice and loose pants uncomfortable on windy days, so he created tight-fitting pants from dyed ice silk. These pants were not only light but also enhanced attack speed by 50% on critical strikes, benefiting both the wearer and the onlookers. Zayed watching was surprised by the advantages of the pants. Shi Qingyi touched Zayed watching's pants and expressed her desire for a pair. Subei mentioned he didn't have spares and intended to keep the pants for himself, but since Junior Sister wanted one, he offered it to her. Shi Qingyi thanked him and decided to change immediately. Subei then resumed teaching Zayed watching, emphasizing that while there are many geniuses, cultivation is about fate. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual and asked about it. Zayed watching questioned if the technique was really without flaws. Shi Qingyi, now wearing the pants, remarked on their comfort and wondered if there was no need to wear a skirt over them. She then noticed Subei's nosebleed and asked if he had a fever. Subei, while inserting his fingers into his nostrils, comments that it might be due to some qi and blood retrograding when he was giving alms to a disciple. He decides to find a more suitable outfit for Shi Qingyi, noting that wearing just trousers isn't appropriate. After some time, Shichingi, now dressed in a suit, remarks that it fits well and feels breezy but questions the purpose of a stick she has been given. Sube explains that the stick is related to Jianqin, which symbolizes the heart and eye of the sword. He encourages her to be indomitable like Jian Wushuang, with a sharp sword and keen faith to face challenges. Shichingi praises her brother's strength. Sube then shifts to another topic, asking what the elder sister wanted to give him. He reads a letter mentioning tight funding and the need for the organizer to address financial issues. Sube wonders about the identity of these people involved. Sube, reflecting on the great cause of Jianzong, expresses that even if the eldest sister were to trample him to death or if his body were to disappear, it would still be worth it. Shichingi, however, tells him to forget it, mentioning that she hasn't seen what the eldest sister's money looks like in the 20 years spent at the pig dumpling shop at the foot of the mountain. Sube admits his stupidity, revealing that he only knew the eldest sister was stingy but didn't expect her to be so excessively so. Shichingi comments that people often use repairing and strengthening spells to settle debts when they eat soup dumplings, and even if the tide of monsters and beasts destroyed Jianzong, the store would likely be chosen. She reassures Sube, saying it's okay. Approaching Sube, she changes his pants. Sube, noticing her large and white chest, is astonished. Shichingi, noticing his reaction, inquires if something is stimulating him. Nervously, Sube explains that he was just thinking about the soup dumplings at the foot of the mountain and is unsure of the stuffing inside them. Shichingi remarks that the dumplings should be stuffed with pork and questions why the boss would give crab roe for free. Sube, considering this, remembers that funds for making steamed buns could come from the fairy pigs from the mountains behind Jianfeng Mountain. Meanwhile, Xiad Ruoqing is seething with anger, feeling humiliated by Sube. She vows to tear him apart once she completes her sword code. Sube then instructs his disciple to stop practicing and instead go to the back mountain to count the number of fairy pigs. Xiad Ruoqing, surprised to learn that the back mountain is actually the location of the ancestral grave, is shocked that Sube keeps pigs there. Sube adds a reminder to bring a torch since it will be getting dark and advises to count carefully. Xiad Ruoqing agrees to follow his instructions. Xiad Ruoqing contemplates the idea of sending Sube to the ancestral grave with a torch, thinking that if anything goes wrong, it won't be her fault if she accidentally causes him to be stuck there for life. In a group setting, Ping Xian inquires about how the recruiting conference is going for Shibei Bei. Shan Wulan observes that the clothing of her sister is quite unique and wonders why only the 5th senior brother in the sect can make such strange things. Sube admits his struggle with raising funds, acknowledging his lack of talent. Shan Wulan, envious of the comfortable pants, wishes she had them too. Ping Xian explains that Jianzong is financially strained and can't provide more money. She notes that the loss of the Jingping sword has caused significant issues, scattering the hearts of the people and making it difficult to lead the team effectively. Shan Wulan remarks that her sister seems to smell like the 5th senior brother. Shichingi expresses hope that a successful recruiting conference will restore Jianzong to its former glory. Shan Wulan privately laments that her sister appears to have fallen for the 5th senior brother completely. Jun Wuxia reflects nostalgically about the heyday of the sword sect and the Jingping sword. Shichingi assumes that her sister's expression shows admiration for her support of her brother. Shan Wulan resolves that despite the current situation, she will find an opportunity to steal the clothes for herself. Sube acknowledges that the recruiting conference is an opportunity for Jianzong to rise to prominence again. A girl then questions whether Sube can handle such a significant event. Despite the large number of people, Sube insists he will manage. The girl asks if Sube has the necessary funds and accuses him of having depleted Jianzong's resources with his extravagant projects, including a peculiar dish made from fengyou chicken. She advises him to listen to her sister's advice, as handling the recruiting conference may be beyond his capability. Sube asks what he should do according to his senior sister's opinion. The girl suggests leaving it to her, as she is capable of managing the situation. She remarks that both the senior sister and Sube are focused on the future of Jianzong but expresses concern over the neglect of the sect's stability. Ping Xian inquires if Sube is certain about his plans. A girl responds that the thriving sword peak, which is under her management, serves as the best evidence. Shan Wulan, frustrated, questions Sube about his laughter. Sube explains that he is thinking of happy things. The girl then questions whether Sube has the financial means to match his enthusiasm. Jun Wuxia praises Sube's alchemy skills, but Sube is puzzled by this compliment, stating that he does not practice alchemy. The girl points out that the thick green smoke seen on Jianfeng Mountain must be due to alchemy, implying that Su-Bei's alchemy skills are indeed significant. A boy rushed forward and informed that it wasn't good news. The ancestral grave of Jianfeng was smoking. A girl questioned how the fifth junior brother couldn't even look after his own mountaintop. Jun Wuxia recognized the smell as roast suckling pig and remarked that the appetizers were calling him. Su-Bei, hearing this, mentioned roast suckling pig and Shi Qingyi called out to him. Su-Bei ran off, concerned about his pig, and thought about not letting his fairy pig burn. Xiad, watching, hiding, wished the ancestor New Year greetings and wanted to see what her master would do. Meanwhile, people were trying to extinguish the fire, exclaiming that the ancestral grave of the fifth elder was burning. They remarked on the fifth elder's pig setting the grave on fire and the manure being covered, and some decided to watch the excitement unfold. Xiad, watching, decided to hide and see what was happening. Jun Wuxia suggested adding some cumin to get the taste just right. Su-Bei lamented the loss of his pig and his money. Ping Xian teased Su-Bei, remarking on how developed his little coffers were. Shan Wulan accused Su-Bei of deceiving his master and destroying his ancestors by using their graves to raise pigs. Shi Qingyi commented on how delicious the pig was, noting that Brother Six was enjoying it. Su-Bei mourned his pig farming plan and startup capital, blaming himself for not anticipating such an event while he was preparing torches for his disciples. Jun Wuxia assured Su-Bei that if he wanted to count pigs, he could always come to him, guaranteeing none would be lost. Su-Bei lamented that there wasn't even one pig head left. Ping Xian speculated that the person counting pigs and the person who set the fire were probably inseparable, and questioned Su-Bei's apprentice courage. Xiad, watching, hiding, worried that the great elder seemed to be planning to let her take the blame, deciding to hold her breath and wait. Su-Bei expressed his sadness over losing 50,000 taels worth of pigs. Another girl accused him of avoiding the important issues, emphasizing that the destruction of Jianfeng's ancestral grave was a serious crime and that even a few fairy pigs couldn't excuse it. She insisted that no matter how he justified it, he would have to face the cliff for 50 years without missing a single day. Shi Qingyi argued that the fifth senior brother shouldn't be blamed for burning the ancestral grave, as he didn't commit the act. She explained that the fifth brother taught her to understand Jianqin, but when she went to the meeting hall, the ancestral grave was already on fire. Shan Wulan, reflecting on her own feelings and intentions, thought that she needed to separate them to have a chance. She then declared that burning ancestral graves was a serious crime and unforgivable, demanding that the guilty party should face the cliff as per the law. Shi Qingyi tried to reason that pushing too hard would be too much for the fifth senior brother to handle. Suspecting that her sister didn't truly hate him, she resolved that the sect must remain united and that she couldn't sit idly by and watch internal conflicts tear them apart. One of the girls pointed out that as soon as Su-Bei left, the ancestral graves caught fire. She added that even if a female disciple was responsible, Su-Bei couldn't escape the responsibility. Jun Wuxia commented to his brother that he should admit it, implying that his brother wouldn't just drink his chicken soup without good reason, like a fairy pig. Ping Xian thought that little Bebe wouldn't recognize his sister, and if he did, he wouldn't be able to help her. Shi Qingyi, contemplating a plan, considered that she could burn a grave to be locked up with her brother and envisioned naming future children Su-Da for boys and Su-Lan for girls. Another girl demanded that Su-Bei hurry up and reveal the identity of the female disciple. Su-Bei, deep in thought, reflected that he had been relying on his apprentice for support all his life and couldn't possibly let her abandon her cultivation and face punishment. He mused that the prodigal disciple was a child of luck, and her actions must have their own significance. Xiad, watching, observing from her hiding spot, thought to herself that the last attempt with chicken soup had failed to trip up her master. She was convinced that he couldn't escape the consequences of burning the ancestral graves. She chuckled to herself, thinking that her master had finally lost. Su-Bei, thinking to himself, believed that the fire was set by the deity instructing the apprentice. A girl pointed out that Su-Bei had admitted this himself. The system then congratulated the host's apprentice for successfully cultivating the sense of exhalation and rewarded a fate dice. The system also informed Su-Bei that he received 5,167 times the feedback, increasing his cultivation base by 5,167. It mentioned that 86.61 million was needed to break through to the late stage of transformation and asked if the host most would use props. Sube confirmed. Sube acknowledged that all the mistakes were his fault and urged not to make it difficult for his disciple. The system congratulated the host's apprentice for successfully cultivating the sense of exhalation and rewarded a dice of destiny. It also congratulated Sube for receiving 5,167 times the feedback, increasing his cultivation base by 5167. It informed him that it would take 86.61 million to break through to the late stage of transformation and asked if he wanted to use props, presenting two options: cancel and confirm. Sube then questioned whether others were not curious about why he burned the graves of his ancestors. A girl urged Sube to stop playing tricks, threatening that unless the ashes of her most Jianfeng were lifted, she could create a big ugly scene, hinting that the ancestral graves seemed to be blowing up. Sube expressed surprise at being tricked by the system again. Jun Wuxia complained about not having finished eating his pork leg and told it to come down quickly, expressing frustration that it was not a sword. Shi Qingyi mentioned that her star sword was out of control. Xiad, watching, observing from hiding, wondered about the situation. She noted that the ancestral graves were burned and bombed, yet the event seemed to resonate with all the elders' sabers. Sube reflected on the saying about looking for dragons and dividing gold to see the mountain. He explained that each level of entanglement is a level of passage and that overcoming 8 levels of danger means surpassing yin and yang and the 8 trigrams. He described the scenario with 2 worlds of yin and yang on one side and blooming flowers on the other, indicating that the situation was chaotic and dangerous, with monsters running rampant. He concluded that finding dragons and sharing gold involves navigating one danger after another. Shi Qingyi expressed admiration, noting how handsome brother looked and questioning who could withstand such a sight. Sube remarked that his practice of geomantic omen was not in vain. He explained to second senior sister that the purpose of burning the ancestral graves was related to the Jingping sword and questioned if that was sufficient. He then thought to himself about the system finally being reliable, acknowledging it as a real test of the heart. He found it difficult to decide whether to pretend or not now that the Jingping sword had emerged. Shi Qingyi commented that she had always known Fifth Elder would not burn the ancestral graves without a reason. Shan Wulan proclaimed that with the Jingping sword in hand, the sword's Sect's position in the 21 continent would remain transcendent forever. Ping Xian questioned what a mere ancestral grave compared to the Jingping sword was. Shi Qingyi realized that senior brother had burned the ancestral grave for the Jingping sword and felt deeply distressed. Sube admitted guilt for burning the ancestral graves and inquired about the possible sentence from second senior sister. Ping Xian commented that acquiring the Jingping sword was worth the destruction of Jianfeng, stating that it would enable the sword sect to return to the ranks of the 985 sect. Xiad Ruoqing expressed her concern to Master, noting that Jinger's clothes were burned and she couldn't face people earlier. Sube reassured her, emphasizing that despite any mistakes, she remained his apprentice and he believed in her. Xiad Ruoqing wondered why Master was protecting her when she was causing him trouble. She reflected on how Master, once gentle, now seemed even more cunning, recognizing his pretense as a skillful act. A girl remarked that finding the Jingping sword was a significant achievement and questioned why they hadn't been informed about the treasure of Jianzhong earlier. Ping Xian urged to quickly explain to senior sister why the old man had been searching for a sword for centuries and why it was burned out. Sube reflected on how, 100 years ago, he discovered that no matter how much he practiced, spiritual energy eluded him. Despite this, he continued his practice tirelessly, spending a century in Hadong and another in Eshi, describing himself as a young man who had struggled. Ping Xian acknowledged his efforts and decided to spare him some embarrassment since he had found the Jingping sword. Shi Qingyi questioned whether the situation had any connection to the Jingping sword and wondered how Sube knew that fire was necessary. Sube responded that everyone has personal secrets they prefer to keep private, and sometimes one must experience things alone. He likened this to the Jingping sword, which, despite being stuck and not easily pulled out, still had its own allure. Ping Xian expressed determination to pull out the sword, insisting that nothing was impossible for her. She demanded that the sword rise. Someone present commented that even the great elder had failed to pull it out. Jun Wuxia wondered if the sword had exploded because the grave was burned and questioned whether burning the grave could indeed cause the sword to explode. Another person suggested that breaking the stone and pulling out the sword might be the solution, though the great elder had been unable to do it. Jun Wuxia thought to himself that he had made a clever observation. Ping Xian remarked that only Mahayana monks might be able to pull out the divine sword, given its significance as the treasure of Jianzhong. She believed that only someone as esteemed as the old master would be qualified. One girl imagined how impressive it would be if the sword were placed in front of the ancestral grave at the highest sword peak, where it would be honored by the 3,000 disciples of the peak, creating a grand and glorious display. A boy urgently warned that something was wrong with the second elder. The girl inquired about the problem. The boy explained that the sixth elder had used the power of void refinement inappropriately, resulting in the ancestral graves at the most sword peak being set ablaze. A girl commented on the situation being varied. Another boy described someone holding a gourd in one hand and an elbow in the other, indulging in eating, drinking, and breathing fire, claiming nothing could stop them and that the ancestral tomb of the sword edge was open. The girl expressed frustration with Jun Wuxia, calling him a little bastard. Ping Xian noted that only one of the second elder and sixth elder might survive and suggested they follow to find out. The girl again scolded Jun Wuxia for his audacity. Jun Wuxia explained that he was following the principle of searching for the dragon and dividing the gold to see the mountain. He claimed that Jianzhong was superior to Jianfeng and that the feng shui of the ancestral tomb was only at the most sword peak. He questioned why Jianfeng had the Jingping sword but not a peerless treasure. The girl thought that since Jun Wuxia had already ordered the burning of the ancestral grave, punishing him wouldn't be effective. She considered that if something valuable was truly beneath, it was connected to her, and she decided to take charge. Ping Xian scolded Jun Wuxia for his audacity, questioning how he could dare to burn the ancestral graves. The girl admitted to ordering the burning herself. Jun Wuxia assured his sister that he would not disappoint her. Shi Qingyi expressed frustration, demanding that Jun Wuxia be told to stop his actions. The girl commanded for the big sword to come out. Ping Xian yelled, accusing Jun Wuxia of daring to destroy Jianzhong's ancestral grave, and declared that she would face 50 years of punishment. Xiad Ruoqing expressed her confusion and concern to her master, contemplating the implications of burning ancestral graves and the possibility of causing harm to her master. She wondered if Su Bei was testing her or if he had anticipated her actions from the beginning. Su Bei, addressing Xiad Ruoqing directly, seemed to dismiss her concerns, suggesting that she sit comfortably despite her apprehensions. He then thought about the technical details required for the high-definition and detailed imagery he was observing, reflecting on the advanced graphics needed to capture such quality. Xiad Ruoqing wondered why Su Bei, who had come to teach her a lesson, was being so gentle. Su Bei then applied a bandage to her foot and asked if it hurt. Xiad Ruoqing thought that despite being stabbed to death without hesitation in her previous life, she was still yearning for this bit of tenderness. Su Bei noted that the swelling had subsided and asked if it still hurt to try. Xiad Ruoqing responded that love didn't hurt anymore. Su Bei then remarked that there are countless intrigues in the world of cultivating immortals, and those without strength are nothing. He warned her not to pretend to be pitiful with him. He mentioned that the matter couldn't be let go and that he would teach her as a teacher when he had the chance in the future. He advised her to rest in the thatched cottage as it was getting dark and to go to the pigsty for the teacher to deal with it overnight. Xiad Ruoqing thought that no matter what Su Bei did to her, her Dao heart was indestructible and that she would kill him in this life. Su Bei then asked if she was ready. Noting that it could be exhausting, Shi Qingyi replied that she was ready, though it was her first time and she had little experience. Su Bei acknowledged that everyone was having their first time. Su Bei asked to see Shi Qingyi's cultivation results. Shi Qingyi requested advice from the fifth senior brother, specifically about the Wushuang challenge, and remarked that while the scene where the senior brother ordered the swords during the day was vivid, it was a pity she couldn't replicate it. Su Bei found it a little tasteless and decided to demonstrate instead. He then performed the Tai Chi swordsmanship, executing it with enthusiasm. Shi Qingyi thought that since the senior brother could pull it out, he should have done so during the day. Su Bei inquired if the junior sister had memorized the practice of being a brother. Shi Qingyi admitted that she only remembered one thing. Su Bei thought that although the junior sister was usually a bit naive, she had a vivid memory when it came to exercises. He wondered if there was more to it. Su Bei asked if the junior sister really remembered only one thing. Shi Qingyi responded that she had forgotten everything. Su Bei then noted that it seemed she had grasped all the essence of the sword techniques and asked if she had any questions. Shi Qingyi thought to herself that despite not having seen anything, the senior brother must be protecting her face. She felt embarrassed and foolish. Shi Qingyi then questioned why, If the senior brother could pull out the Jingping sword, he was unwilling to show it to others during the day. Su Bei mentioned that Brother Wei had just pulled out a sword. He then thought to himself that it might be a Jingping sword and regretted missing such a good opportunity to show off. He found the big baby amusing and planned to repeat the process to make the Jingping sword come out. Shi Qingyi mentioned that the Jingping sword did not seem to be moving. Su Bei explained that the junior sister did not know that such a precious item could not be obtained easily and that the elder brother was communicating with it. Shi Qingyi then asked if it was still possible to increase tacit understanding with the sword spirit. Su Bei thought to himself that if he wasn't allowed to pull it out, he would miss the chance to pretend to do so. Shi Qingyi noticed that the brother seemed very tired and wondered if he couldn't pull out the sword. Su Bei responded that the Jingping sword had its own thoughts and was asleep. Shi Qingyi was surprised by the mention of sleep. Su Bei then questioned who would practice swords late into the night and expressed concern that someone might be arriving. Shi Qingyi recognized the aura as belonging to her sister's Sea of Clouds sword. Su Bei, while covering Shi Qingyi's mouth, instructed her to stay quiet and not let her sister find out. He advised her to hide in the pigsty for a while and assured her that he would let her come out later. Shi Qingyi asked if there was anything shameful about their cultivation. She then wondered if her sister would discover that she had been mistreated and whether she could be punished for it. Su Bei explained that this was an important step in practicing Jianqin. He emphasized that if one wanted to find others' flaws, they should not expose their own. He also reminded her to tighten her aura and avoid being discovered by Jiushimi. Shi Qingyi expressed her determination to complete the practice and inquired when Su Bei would release his hold, indicating she was about to go in. Su Bei responded by saying that if she took a lower position, she might still be able to see her own foolishness. Shan Wulan thought to herself that Su Bei must have had a hard time cleaning up the mess after Jianfeng burned so badly. She considered helping her brother since she happened to pass by, and reasoned that it was understandable to take away and lose a few pieces of her senior's underwear due to the darkness. She then excitedly announced her approach, humorously noting that if Su Bei was left alone, it would just be the two of them in the pigsty, with a playful tone. Shan Wulan thought to herself that although it was a fairy pig and had been fragrant for a long time, it smelled like a woman. However, it didn't seem to be the female apprentice but more like a sister. Su Bei remarked that a rootless tree with secluded flowers had entered the fairy road and could not be repaired. Floating things were like a boat of bitterness, not free despite floating around. He mused about the long road to immortality, questioning whether immortality itself was attainable and noting the beauty of Quanjianzongzong. He reflected on the merciless nature of the avenue and the boundless road to immortality, wondering if someone would accompany him to enjoy this place together. Shan Wulan thought to herself that the idea of enjoying together in that place seemed strange. She wondered if the fifth senior brother really wanted to share it with her. She reflected on how the fifth senior brother shouldered the crimes for the apprentice during the day and endured loneliness alone at night, concluding that only the junior sister truly understood him. August 5th, 1:02 p.m. Kunal Jadov. Su Bei considered that while he might deceive others with his acting skills, he couldn't deceive the ninth junior sister. Shan Wulan then thought that the senior brother was attempting to fool her, noting that his loneliness led him to recite poems to the pigsty, which she found odd. She was surprised to find senior brother reciting poems to the pigsty in the middle of the night. Su Bei asked why the ninth martial sister had appeared at Brothers Bujian Peak in the middle of the night. Shan Wulan mentioned that one can appreciate the moon in their heart even without it being visible, expressing a preference for the moon covered by clouds. She questioned why someone couldn't come without Jianfeng. Su Bei thought that despite usually disliking himself, he had sneaked in during the night. He wondered what else besides the Jingping sword was worth his trouble. He then remarked that anyone could visit Jianfeng anytime. He was puzzled by why Shan Wulan didn't draw her sword and what she was searching for. He wondered if she had found her sister. Shan Wulan thought that the senior brother must have been with other women and stayed up most of the night in front of the ancestral grave. She was frustrated that despite preparing herself, he was playing with other women.